This single photograph made Germany realize they'd already lost World War II, and they had absolutely no idea America could do this. Germany has conquered most of Europe in less than 2 years. Poland, 3 weeks. France, 6 weeks. Their generals are the best in the world. Their soldiers are battle-hardened. Their tactics are revolutionary. And then there's America, an army of barely 200,000 men, training with wooden rifles because they don't have enough real ones. Officers whose last combat experience was World War I. German intelligence had studied America for decades, and their conclusion, shared by basically every military in Europe, was simple. Americans are soft, undisciplined, and not a serious threat. They calculated it would take America at least 3 years to pose any real danger. But on June 6, 1944, when German officers looked through their binoculars at the beaches of Normandy, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Something that shouldn't have been possible. Something that broke every calculation they'd made. This is the story of how Germany fundamentally misunderstood what they were fighting, and the exact moments when they realized their mistake. But to understand how they got it so wrong, we need to go back to where this miscalculation began. A German intelligence officer sits in Berlin, reading production reports from America. And these numbers don't make sense. American shipyards are claiming they're producing Liberty cargo ships, massive cargo vessels, at a rate of 3 per day. The officer checks again. That can't be right. That's faster than U-boats can sink them. That would mean they're building a 10,000-ton cargo ship in just 70 days. It takes Germany almost a year to build a ship that size. Then he sees the aircraft numbers. America is claiming they produced 96,000 aircraft in a single year. Germany's entire annual production? 25,000 planes. Tank production? America. 29,000 tanks in 1943. Germany. 12,000 tanks in 1943. The officer sends these reports up the chain with a note. Requires verification. Numbers appear to be propaganda. But here's what Germany didn't understand. America had done something no nation in history had ever attempted. They'd turned warfare into an assembly line. Henry Ford's car factory techniques applied to warships. Mass production applied to weapons of war. Liberty ships. They'd broken down construction into 250,000 prefabricated parts. Different factories made different sections. Then they'd assembled them like building blocks. The fastest Liberty ship ever built? The SS Robert E. Peary. Construction time, 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. From keel laying to launch, less than 5 days. When German High Command finally confirmed these numbers were real, they recalculated. America was outproducing Germany by 3 to 1, 4 to 1, in some categories 5 to 1. And while doing this, they were also supplying massive amounts of material to Britain and the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease. The math was starting to look really bad. But German generals had faced numerical superiority before. On the Eastern Front, Soviets threw human waves at them. Superior German tactics and training had held. Americans might have more equipment, but they didn't have better soldiers, or so Germany thought. The first test of this theory came in North Africa. February 1943, Tunisia. American forces meet German Afrika Korps for the first time at a place called Kasserine Pass, and it goes exactly how Germany expected. German forces, led by Rommel, absolutely maul the inexperienced Americans. It's a crushing defeat. 6,000 American casualties. Complete chaos. German officers send reports back. Americans confirmed as inferior troops. Panic easily. Poor coordination, as expected. But then America did something that no European military had ever done. They learned. In weeks, not months, not years, weeks, American forces completely overhauled their tactics. New commanders appointed. Tank destroyer doctrine revised. Infantry armor coordination drilled relentlessly. Artillery tactics reformed. 4 months later, Sicily, the rematch. Same American army, completely different performance. And German defenders noticed something disturbing. When Americans encountered a defended position, they didn't charge it like the Russians. They didn't try to outmaneuver it like the British. They got on the radio, fire mission, grid coordinates, and then the sky just opened up. Let me show you what made German soldiers lose their minds. A German infantry division in 1944 was allocated approximately 7,000 artillery shells per month. An American infantry division in 1944 fired approximately 7,000 artillery shells per day. American artillery officers didn't think about conserving ammunition. That concept didn't exist in their doctrine. Their field manuals literally said, "When in doubt, use more firepower." A captured German officer wrote in his diary, "The Americans don't fight like soldiers. They fight like men with unlimited money who can order destruction the way we order coffee." A single American platoon has more firepower support than our entire regiment. Here's how the same battle scenario played out differently. German approach: scout enemy position, calculate minimum force needed, coordinate precise attack, conserve ammunition for next battle, accept calculated casualties. American approach: spot enemy position, call in artillery, call in air support, call in tanks, call in more artillery, wait, send in infantry to mop up. To German commanders, this looked cowardly, wasteful, unsporting, but it was also devastatingly effective. Americans were taking 50 to 60% fewer casualties than Germans in equivalent operations. They were advancing slower than German blitzkrieg, but they were advancing continuously. No operational pauses, no waiting for supplies, just constant, relentless, grinding pressure. And this is where we need to talk about the supply dumps. When German forces captured American supply positions, which happened occasionally in the early fighting, their logistics officers couldn't believe what they found. Mountains of ammunition, more than German divisions received in months. Spare parts for everything: engines, radios, weapons, vehicles, medical supplies in quantities that seemed insane. Food, so much food. A German soldier's daily ration, about 2,000 calories, often less, frequently supplemented with whatever they could forage. An American soldier's daily ration, 4,000 calories, cigarettes included, chocolate, coffee. A single American C ration, the emergency field ration they complained about, contained more meat and better food than German soldiers saw in a week. A German quartermaster wrote in his report, "The enemy supply doctrine appears to violate every principle of military efficiency. They stockpile redundantly at every level. The waste is extraordinary. Yet their soldiers never lack for anything." German logistics philosophy: calculate minimum necessary, distribute efficiently, maximize combat power per ton. American logistics philosophy: stockpile everything. Assume 30% waste, ensure zero shortages. The Red Ball Express, the American truck convoy system supplying the advance across France, was moving 12,500 tons of supplies per day. That's more than the entire German army in the West received in a week. And then there was the mechanization gap. In 1944, the German army still moved primarily the same way Napoleon's army had, on foot, with horse-drawn wagons. The German Wehrmacht used approximately 2.7 million horses during World War II. They were the second largest consumer of horses in the war after the Soviet Union. Only Germany's elite Panzer and Panzer Grenadier divisions were fully motorized, and even those divisions depended heavily on captured vehicles. French trucks, Soviet trucks, Czech trucks, a maintenance nightmare. The American Army, every single unit fully motorized. The U.S. Army had 2.4 million trucks, standardized models, interchangeable parts. When an American division needed to move, they loaded up and drove. When a German division needed to move, they marched for days, arrived exhausted. An American division could relocate 200 miles in 24 hours. A German division needed 4 to 5 days to march the same distance. And this is when German commanders started to understand. They weren't just outnumbered. They were fighting a military from a different century. But the full scope of what they faced didn't become clear until June 6, 1944. June 5, 1944, the French coast. Quiet. German commanders know an invasion is coming. They've built elaborate defenses, the Atlantic Wall. Feldmarshal Rommel has personally inspected every critical sector. Millions of mines laid. Obstacles on the beaches, artillery positions prepared. German intelligence estimates the Allies can land perhaps 50,000 men in the first wave. Maybe 100,000 in the first 3 days. The plan is to destroy them on the beaches before they can establish a foothold. It's a good plan. A professional plan. June 6th, dawn. German sentries hear something. They look out to sea, and more ships appear, and more. And the horizon fills with vessels. 5,000 ships, not 50, not 500, 5,000 ships. And that's when Germany realized. They hadn't just miscalculated. They'd been playing a completely different game. The initial landings at Normandy were brutal. American forces took heavy casualties at Omaha Beach. German defenses worked exactly as planned. For the first 6 to 8 hours, German officers felt vindicated. See? Americans bleed just like everyone else. But by nightfall, 150,000 Allied troops were ashore. Not the 50,000 Germany expected. 150,000 in one day. And then the ships kept coming. June 7th, another 50,000 troops, plus supplies. June 8th, more troops, more supplies. June 9th, the flow never stopped. Within a week, the Normandy beaches looked like an industrial site. America had literally brought artificial harbors with them, prefabricated in Britain, towed across the Channel. By the end of June, just 3 weeks after D-Day, the Allies had landed 850,000 troops, 150,000 vehicles, and 570,000 tons of supplies. German intelligence officers kept sending reports. The buildup rate exceeds our estimates by factors of 2 to 3 times. This level of logistics should not be sustainable. But it was sustained, day after day. Now the Germans still had advantages. This was hedgerow country, small fields surrounded by thick walls of earth and vegetation, perfect defensive terrain, every field a fortress. German troops were experts at defense, and the Americans advanced slowly, very slowly. German reports noted this: enemy shows excessive caution, relies too heavily on firepower support. Infantry quality remains questionable. But here's what those reports didn't capture. Germans were taking 3-to-1 casualty ratios compared to Americans in these grinding battles. When an American unit took casualties, the replacement system delivered fresh troops within days. When a German unit took casualties, they just got weaker. Americans were firing 5 to 10 times more artillery shells than Germans. When Americans encountered a stubborn strongpoint, they'd call in bombers, not a few bombers, hundreds of bombers. Before the St. Lo breakthrough, Americans dropped 5,000 tons of bombs in a single preparatory bombardment in one day. That's more bombs than Germany dropped on Britain during the entire month of September 1940 during the Blitz, concentrated in one sector, in hours. A German survivor wrote, "The ground shook continuously for 2 hours. We stopped being soldiers and became animals seeking shelter. When it finally stopped, half our men were dead or insane. We had no ammunition, no communications, no will to fight. And then their infantry hadn't even arrived yet." This was the American method. Identify resistance, deploy overwhelming firepower, wait, advance into rubble, repeat. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't clever, but it worked, reliably, repeatedly. Field by field, hedgerow by hedgerow, the Americans ground forward, and German units that had been battle-hardened on the Eastern Front were being worn down, not destroyed in decisive battles, just worn down. Every engagement was a net loss for Germany, even tactical victories. Germans repel American attack. German casualties 40, American casualties 100. 1 week later, Americans returned to same position with 100 fresh replacement troops. Germans still short 40 men. This went on for 6 weeks. And then came Operation Cobra, July 25, 1944. The Americans have been stuck in Normandy for 7 weeks, still haven't broken out of the hedgerow country. German lines are thinning, but they're holding. The plan, Operation Cobra, a concentrated breakthrough attempt on a narrow front. The target, a 7,000-yard section of German line near Saint-Lô, 7,000 yards, about 4 miles wide. And to break through this 4-mile section of line, America deployed 1,500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, 550 fighter bombers, over 1,000 artillery pieces, and 5 full divisions for the assault. The bombardment began at 0938 hours. For 3 hours, bombs rained down on that 4-mile stretch. Total ordnance dropped, 4,700 tons on 4 miles of front. In 3 hours, entire German units ceased to exist, not retreated, not surrendered, ceased to exist. The commander of the Panzer Lehr Division, an elite armored formation, reported, "By 1200 hours, my division no longer exists as a fighting force. 70% casualties, all communications destroyed, survivors scattered and in shock." And then the American tanks came through. But here's where it got really different. American armored divisions didn't advance cautiously. They drove at maximum speed, bypassed resistance instead of stopping to fight, drove straight into German rear areas, supply depots, command posts, artillery positions, all designed to be safe behind the lines. Within 72 hours, American forces had advanced 30 miles. The German defensive line didn't just break, it disintegrated. Feldmarschall Günther von Kluge, commanding German forces in France, sent this message to Hitler: "The enemy has achieved a breakthrough of our front. Our forces are being systematically destroyed. The enemy can do what he wants. The enemy can do what he wants." That last line tells you everything. Germany had lost the initiative. Completely. What followed was called the Pursuit Across France, and it demonstrated American capabilities that seemed to violate the laws of military logistics. August 1944. American armored divisions are advancing across France at speeds that military planners thought impossible. 50 miles in a day, 60 miles, 70 miles. Patton's Third Army, activated on August 1st, advanced over 600 miles in less than a month. Their supply lines stretched back to the Normandy beaches, hundreds of miles. German military doctrine said this was impossible. An army can't maintain cohesion while advancing this fast, this far from supply bases. But it was happening. The Red Ball Express, the American truck convoy system, 6,000 trucks running 24/7, moving 12,500 tons of supplies daily. On a closed-loop highway from Normandy to the front, drivers, many of them African-American soldiers in segregated units, driving 20-plus hour shifts. To put that in perspective, 12,500 tons per day is equivalent to 25 million pounds of supplies, more than the entire German Army Group West received in a week. When American vehicles broke down, they were repaired or replaced within hours. When German vehicles broke down, they were often abandoned because spare parts didn't exist. When Americans reached a river, engineers would have a bridge up in 6 to 12 hours. Bailey bridges, prefabricated modular bridges, could support 40-ton tanks and be assembled in hours. German engineers using traditional methods needed days. Americans crossed the Seine, the Moselle, the Meuse, one after another. But let's talk about what this felt like on the ground. For the individual soldiers caught in this industrial meat grinder, meet Obergefreiter Hans Wolf. Not his real name, we're using a composite of several German soldier accounts, but his experience was typical. Hans was a veteran, fought in Russia, earned an Iron Cross, knew how to fight. In July 1944, His unit was pulled from the Eastern Front and sent to France as a fire brigade to stop the American breakout. He'd fought the Soviets. He knew what overwhelming force meant. Waves of infantry, mass tank attacks. His first contact with Americans was different. It started with sound, distant thunder that grew louder. Then the shells came, and came, and came. Hans later wrote, "We thought the Americans would advance after the barrage. We prepared to fight. But the barrage didn't stop. It continued for 2 hours, then 3. We ran out of ammunition. Then we ran out of men who weren't wounded. And still the shells came." When American infantry finally arrived, Hans's position had 12 men left from an original platoon of 45. They surrendered immediately. In the POW camp, Hans saw things that broke his understanding of warfare. American supplied dumps with more food than his unit had seen in 6 months. American medics treating German wounded with the same care as American wounded. Equipment, helmets, boots, rifles, piled so high that Americans treated it as disposable. Hans later reflected, "We had been told Americans were weak, undisciplined. I saw an army that was better fed, better equipped, better supported than anything in the German military. They didn't need to be brave. They had already won." Now meet PFC Robert Chen, again composite character from multiple American accounts. 6 months ago, Robert was in high school in California. Now he's in France carrying an M1 Garand rifle. His first time under fire, he's terrified. Pins down behind a wall as German machine gun fire tears through the hedgerow above him. His squad leader gets on the radio, fire mission, enemy machine gun position, grid coordinates. They wait 5 minutes. Then 6 artillery shells land directly on the German position. Machine gun stops. Robert realizes he doesn't have to be a hero. He doesn't have to do a one-man charge like in the movies. He just has to spot the enemy. Call it in. Wait. Let the system work. Robert wrote home, "The Germans are tough soldiers, but we don't fight them alone. Every time we get stuck, we have artillery, planes, tanks. They have to be brave. We just have to be patient." This was the American psychological advantage. German soldier mindset: I must be brave, skillful, endure hardship. Victory depends on my personal excellence. American soldier mindset: I'm part of a system. The system is overwhelming. My job is to not screw up. The system will win. One-on-one, German soldiers were often more skilled. But warfare isn't one-on-one. It's system versus system. And one system had unlimited artillery. By late 1944, Germany knew they were losing. The question was, how long they could hold. And Hitler decided on one last gamble. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. American forces hold a thinly stretched line through heavily forested terrain. What they don't know, Germany has assembled its last operational reserve, 200,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns. The plan: strike through the Ardennes, exactly where Germany attacked in 1940. Drive to Antwerp, split the Allied armies, capture American supply dumps, force a negotiated peace. It's desperate. But Germany is desperate. December 16th, 5:30 a.m. The largest German artillery barrage of the entire Western Front campaign begins, followed by 200,000 German troops attacking on a 50-mile front. And it works. American lines collapse. Units are surrounded. Communications break down. The Germans surround the town of Bastogne, a critical road junction, trapping the 101st Airborne Division. Within 3 days, German forces create a bulge 50 miles deep into American lines. For the first time in months, German commanders feel hope. Maybe Americans aren't invincible. Maybe tactical surprise can overcome material superiority. At Bastogne, surrounded American paratroopers are running out of ammunition and medical supplies. December 22nd, German commanders send a surrender ultimatum. American General Anthony McAuliffe's response: nuts. The German officers literally don't understand the American slang and ask for clarification. The American interpreter explains it means go to hell. The Germans prepare for a final assault to crush Bastogne. And then America showed Germany what industrial warfare really meant. December 19, 1944, 3 days after the German attack, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, Eisenhower's headquarters. The American response to the crisis is being organized, and what happens next would have seemed impossible by German military standards. Eisenhower orders entire divisions, 40,000-man formations, to completely change direction and relocate hundreds of miles, in winter conditions, through snow and ice, at maximum speed. Patton's Third Army, which had been attacking east toward Germany, is ordered to pivot 90 degrees and attack north toward Bastogne. Eisenhower asks Patton, "When can you attack?" Patton answers, "December 22nd, 3 days." The staff officers think Patton is being overconfident. To attack on December 22nd meant disengaging from current offensive, rotating 90 degrees, moving 3 divisions, 75,000 men plus equipment, 100-plus miles in 72 hours in winter, while coordinating with other units and arriving ready to fight immediately. German intelligence picks up signs of this movement. They calculate, impossible. Earliest Americans could launch a relief operation, January 5th to 10th, December 22nd. Patton attacks, exactly when he said he would. German commanders are stunned. How did Americans move entire armies like pieces on a chessboard? The answer: infrastructure. America had built comprehensive road networks, supply dumps every 50 miles, centralized truck pools, standardized fuel and ammunition, pre-positioned bridging equipment, and forward airfields. Germany had horse-drawn wagons and desperate improvisation. December 23rd. The weather clears, and the sky just fills. Thousands of American aircraft appear. C-47 transport planes drop supplies to surrounded troops in Bastogne. P-47 fighter bombers attack German columns on every road. On a single day, December 24th, American forces flew over 15,000 sorties, 15,000 individual aircraft missions. In one day, German forces that had been advancing stopped, then started retreating. December 26th. Patton's forces break through to Bastogne. The siege is broken. The German offensive stalls completely. And then the American counterattack begins. The bulge gets pushed back, slowly, then faster. German casualties: 100,000 men, 800-plus tanks, 1,000-plus aircraft. Germany's last operational reserve gone. American losses: significant. But within 2 weeks, every American unit is back to full strength. Fresh troops, new equipment, full ammunition stocks. The German units that survived? Hollow shells, 30 to 40% strength. No replacements coming, no equipment to replace losses, no fuel for the tanks they still had. General Hasso von Manteuffel, who commanded the German 5th Panzer Army in the offensive, later wrote, "The Battle of the Bulge was our last gasp. We gambled everything. We achieved surprise. We broke through their lines, and none of it mattered. The Americans simply brought more troops, more supplies, more firepower than we could counter. We didn't lose because we fought badly. We lost because they could absorb any blow and keep fighting." January 1945. Germany is crumbling. But the war isn't over yet. One more demonstration of American capabilities was coming. The final proof that German commanders had completely miscalculated what they were facing. The Rhine River, the last major natural barrier protecting Germany's heartland. Germany pulls together every remaining unit. Volkssturm, home guard units of teenagers and old men, armed with whatever weapons remain. March 7, 1945. American forces capture the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact, a miraculous stroke of luck. But let's focus on what happened when Americans had to do it the hard way. Operation Plunder. The planned Rhine crossing at Wiesel. This is where America demonstrated the absolute pinnacle of industrial warfare. To cross the Rhine at one location, America assembled 1,250,000 troops in the theater, 6,500 artillery pieces, 3,000 plus tanks, 15,000 plus support vehicles, 10,000 plus tons of bridging equipment, 16,000 paratroopers for airborne assault, and 4,000 plus aircraft. March 23rd, nightfall. The bombardment begins. For the Rhine crossing, Allied artillery fired approximately 65,000 shells in the first hour. That's more than 1,000 shells per minute. For comparison, the entire German army in the West had perhaps 1,000 artillery pieces left. Total. Then the boats go in the water. American engineers start building bridges, under fire, at night. Within 24 hours, first bridge operational at 10:45 a.m. on March 24th. Second bridge operational by afternoon. By March 25th, 9 bridges operational. Tanks crossing continuously. German forces launch counterattacks. They're swept aside by artillery and airstrikes. The bridgehead expands. In 48 hours, American forces establish a bridgehead 30 miles deep. The German defensive line doesn't just crack, it evaporates. German Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding what remained of German forces in the West, sends his final assessment to Berlin. Organized resistance is no longer possible. The enemy possesses overwhelming superiority in numbers, equipment, and mobility. Our forces are exhausted and cannot prevent Allied advances. The end is a matter of weeks, not months. American and Allied forces race into Germany, bypassing cities, surrounding pockets of resistance, advancing 30 to 40 miles per day. They liberate concentration camps and discover the full horror of what Germany had been doing. April 1945. The German military isn't fighting anymore. It's disintegrating. May 7th, 1945. Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe is over. So when did Germany learn that America was built different? It wasn't one day. It was the intelligence officer reading production numbers that seemed impossible. The quartermaster examining captured supply dumps. The commander watching 5,000 ships appear on the horizon. The veteran watching American industrial firepower obliterate positions in minutes. The staff officer watching entire armies relocate in 72 hours. The final defenders watching bridges appear faster than they could destroy them. Germany had studied American weakness. They understood American individualism, soft civilian culture, lack of military tradition. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that America had changed the nature of warfare itself. They'd turned war into an industrial process, mass production applied to destruction, abundance as a military strategy, logistics as a weapon. The lessons echo today. Military power isn't just about tactics or courage or tradition. It's about industrial capacity, supply chains, the ability to sustain operations indefinitely. In World War II, Germany fought brilliantly. But brilliance wasn't enough, because sometimes the opponent isn't trying to outfight you. They're trying to outproduce you. And when one side can replace losses overnight while the other can't replace them at all, the outcome was never in doubt. Germany learned America was different. They just learned it too late.